given your involvement in both the investigation and archival, what moment would you say has been the most pivotal to the progression of the Interloper ARG?
The most pivotal point to progression in this whole thing has got to be killing the cone, honestly. Because killing the cone opened up such a massive, world that we weren't able to ever experience before normally. Because we were able to walk through the source void ourselves, even if it was done through a less than ideal method of inputs with the whole ordinance and everything. But that is probably the biggest, I think, turning point for all of this because this is something we've never really been able to experience. I mean, hell, we even got to see more of Gris, which is something that we have not seen anything of, except like a 30-second low quality video. That is probably the biggest part of all this, in my opinion. I'm not sure what else could even come close to that moment of the cone dying. Except, I mean, there was Ordnance, and Ordnance was a big, big deal. But there was not. It was so slow burn that it was hard to get excited about anything, if you know what I mean. I don't know, that's my opinion on the whole thing.
Do you have any plans with Gag 9 if the views are confirmed to be over with?
Jack 9 is not going to end after the views are over. I want to expand it into being a more of an archival site for the entirety of Interloper and not just CGE 7. Like, for example, I would love to rehost all of the Tuesday manifest demos and the maps and create pages breaking them down because I just feel like there might be better ways to represent the information than just having a big text dump onto a wiki. The currently me and Sierra and Quantabyte are working on a fork of noclip.website for GAC9, which is a project that will allow people to view the CG7 and any other maps in their browser without having to actually load them into their own game. It's an interesting idea, and we're trying to make it as accurate as possible to the games as we can reasonably. And I also want to try and use GAC9 to promote as many community projects as I can because there are a lot of talented individuals in this community that I would like to show off the work of, and hopefully a place people will see it so people will go and check it out.
What do you consider to be the most critical part of the Interloper ARG investigation?
I think the most critical part of this investigation was finding the CGE7 server itself because it was kind of out there in terms of theories until people recognized that's what the shape said. I think even Anamide, if I remember correctly, had to come in and point out some of the letters itself because they were really, really hard to decipher. I remember him joining a TF2 server and pointing out that something looked like an E, if I remember correctly. I think that would be the most critical part because just discovering that whole TF2 server, as well as getting to our first code map like sewer, which really, really showed us, I guess, kind of how deep this all runs, like what this would give us access to. I think that was extremely interesting how the server had access to all these old item machinima videos like control and mona the head find. It showed us.
Lastly, what theories, if any, do you have?
I think from here on out the series is going to heavily focus on maybe getting access to the internal tools that FSky was using, especially since we got Gris in the last V renders. It makes me feel like that maybe that has been opened on Nanomi's PC or he has access to it. It feels like it's going to allow us to, I guess, delve a lot deeper into how the DM NPCs work. And other than that, I'm not really sure how else it could proceed. because the view renders really didn't give us a whole bunch of concrete stuff.
Thank you, Lunescape. I'll now head over to Tad Z. Thank you for coming. Now, Tad Z, do you think the community investigation as we know it is dead in the waters?
Dead in the waters is a bit of a dramatic way of saying it, but I would say I think it's mostly done on our side. Interloper F has been confirmed up and down to be the final for Interloper, so it would be quite the low odds that there is more for us to do with the server. This is definitely not the end of the community investigation for Nomade's wider Skybox series, though. I mean, not only is Wonderstock going to be an ARG about an in-universe ARG, but Nomade himself has even said he does want to do something on the level of the server's participation again. So if you like what you see with Interloper, do stick around for his next project. That teaser looked damn good.
Now, Tad Z, has Project Skybox approached you given your role in the destruction of the cone in CGE 7-193?
Nope, nada. Which makes sense. I am just some guy who got lucky and killed a cone. I just so happened to land a lucky 1 in 4 chance of being the one selected out of the people who made it to cone the second time. I have reached out and talked with Anomade a fair bit, though, and he's a pretty chill guy. The main reason being because of the contributors list for Interloper E that me and Tex made.
Finally, before we get to your theories, what do you think the cone's true purpose was?
I've bounced back and forth on this, but I've landed on the idea that the cone was sort of a prison/container for both CGE 7193 and Anomi. Anomone was trapped in the emulator at a standstill until, after all the other things we had done to get to and kill the cone, he was finally freed from it. The spawn of the version of cone he was in with the Taurus even has him spawning right under where the cone was. It's likely that in the Type 5 demo CGE originates from, when it got captured and just stuck in place, the cone container could have been built around it. After all those years of being trapped like that and having it beg us to kill the cone, I think it was truly the right and only option to progress.
Now then, what are your theories?
Ordnance is pretty hard to understand doing large because we don't have Interloper F yet, so we don't know what the payoff of everything was. And while I do still see a lot of dissatisfied people who really wanted us to explore the Gris-like program we got, at the end I do still think save and quit was the correct choice. It got us to Ord End, which from the looks of it, is almost definitely the place where Mona was deleted when you cross-reference it with Ida's I'm Done Goodbye video, and that is more significant than we might think, because now that Anomade has Sourcebox, he can use the coordinates to locate where the body is in the source void and find her, Mona. And if I were to guess, this would have to progress the story in some way that Anomade originally couldn't tinker with beforehand, which will probably end up giving him the Gris-like application we saw at the end. Remember, while getting Sourcebox already was a great feat, he could only seemingly access one of the 3 options laid out. The sphere gives him an invalid graphics drivers reference, and the cube didn't do anything. The cone option letting him see the entire source void coordinates are cool, but that really is more of a tool that lets him look at stuff rather than actually doing something, which the Gris-like application will probably let him do. And those two in tandem will let him have entire free access to the source void. And that's pretty big.
Given your technical experience in internet technology, what do you think is the most innovative, unique event or technological pitch that INA Midday has presented in the Interloper IRG?
I don't think there's anything particularly innovative per se about how the Interloper ARG is structured story-wise. Like, there's no on the back end. There's not really, like, he's not making up. Well, I guess he is kind of making up technology, but it's not too far-fetched. Is what drew me in. It's not really the it's not the stuff presented. It's more how it's presented, if that makes sense. Where instead of the usual like ARG type kind of creepypasta-ish, I guess unfiction is the word for it, where they just kind of make up a Deus Ex Machina or just some reason for why everything works. The Interloper is rooted in actual things that could be plausible. The Interloper command itself, get s.interlope.pull, 27015. To me, I know this is likely not how Source Engine works, because I'm not fully familiar with Source Engine, which I think is why a lot of this stuff works for me, but that to me reads like it's pulling information from a specific port. And if you go to Ida's video, Ida's third interloper investigation, he specifically says, oh, if you connect to this IP, then you can interlope. So the implication there being that you connect to this IP, and 27015 is the port you connect to get all this information. That's kind of what got me hooked on it, because it was like, oh, wow, this is actually, like, this could be doable. And then there's all these little things throughout the series that just add up in really, really small ways. Some that I didn't even know about, like the pinhole camera. I didn't even know that was a thing that you could do in the Source engine. I thought that was like I know that the Source engine does like its own ray tracing baked in, but I didn't know that it worked that well, that you could actually have a pinhole camera. I just took it as part of the story, like, oh yeah, this is how we did it. But coming to learn that these things are actually real, and that, like, because it makes sense. Oh, it's the whole bit of VRAD writes to a file, and we can see what file it's writing to. So if we put one here, it'll overwrite it. That's so simple, but it's such a real detail that programs will work like that. Really, really old programs will work like that. They'll just say, I'm writing to this file. I don't care what's there. I don't care what I'm overwriting. I am writing to this file, and that's the end of it. And then what really got me, like the crux of it, was after watching the whole series in Interloper E when he connected to the FTP server. I was like, okay, we're looping it back around and we're doing like FTP shit. Like it just, I don't know. I'm geeking out about it again, but it's just the way that Anomi keeps the narrative intact while still applying like IT principles, I suppose. It works so well for the medium and the story he's telling.
We know that you had a major part in helping the investigation focus on trying to descend into the source void. Could you explain the series of events that made you join the server and point out what we were doing wrong?
So the whole story about how we descended further into the source void is actually really, really funny in hindsight. Because I joined the server, the Discord server, I think around view 75-ish. I think a little before we found Cone Helper in the maze. And everybody was playing it so cautiously. Like, only do a couple inputs per ordinance, like maybe move a few steps in this direction. And a lot of these people that were, like, stage was live at the time. And a lot of these people were kind of veterans or people who had been there since either during Culks or pre-Culks. So it's all like people who have been investigating, people who want to like go through it and just inspect it piece by piece, make sure you're not missing anything. Meanwhile, I, as somebody who just got done finishing the entire series in like 3 days because it was fascinating, I got in and what I saw was the maze. Like, ignoring everything else, ignoring the things that had been seen in the maze, it was maze. And my line of logic was, even as far back as Interloper 4, one of, like, Interloper 4, the live investigation, the thing that took the stream down was going through a door. The Portal RTX window went through a door. And in all these little bits and pieces have been adding up throughout the series, where the overarching theme is getting into doors to progress in the story. The ones I can think of right now off the top of my head are Interloper 4, Interloper C, like the whole end of the Sky Crash incident, and of course, Interloper E, which I had just watched before I got into the server. So I saw a maze, and if you think about it from like a gameplay perspective, I guess it makes sense. Anomi present like the I think unfortunately Garfield is the one who put it in these terms, where it's like, think of the original Super Mario Brothers. You have World 1-1, which is kind of getting you in there, giving you it presents you with an enemy. First off, gives you the ability to jump, tells you to jump over obstacles and over pits. It establishes these clear gameplay goals so that when you go to the next few levels, it builds off of them. Where with Interloper, everybody got sent to the maze. It established some very clear goals of getting through the maze, dodging obstacles, pressing buttons to get further. And then there was Cone, which was the same maze again, same layout, but different starting point, I believe. I'm not entirely clear on how Cone, where the spawn point in Cone is, but it was another maze. Functionally the same thing, but with a different start point, so you could use previous knowledge to get to where you needed to go. And then Ordnance happened. And if you look at Ordnance from a gameplay perspective, Garfield said this as well, it is actively hostile to exploration. You get 13 frames every 6 hours, maybe, assuming the cycle doesn't break, and you only get so many inputs that you can do. Like, if you want to turn in a direction, you can't really do anything else, or else you might miss something. It's hostile to exploration. But what we had is a maze that exclusively operates on a 2D plane. Like, it doesn't go diagonally. It goes up, down, left, right. There's no, like, diagonal hallways. You don't gotta BS around with it. It can be solved with a D-pad. And what we were given for controls is directional inputs on axes. So to me, in my mind, it made such an unbelievable amount of sense that you get maze, then you get cone, then you get ordnance, which is back in maze. You can't see much, you can't move much, but you can generally tell where you are. And using that information, you can like map it out and use the inputs to do really long inputs, assuming we assuming we know how far we move per input, we'll get to that later, to get to the buttons and just, because you can no-clip in ordnance. So you can just no-clip straight to where you want to go. So I had like 2 or 2.5 hours of this where I got on stage and I was just talking at people with this exact pitch, because at the time it made so much sense where you go from level 1, level 2, level 3. And then from there on in, you use the information that you've gained in the past levels to solve the next one. It's a puzzle. It's an ARG. It makes sense. So myself and Octopulpo, we got these inputs together. It was, I think, 54, either 54 or 56 inputs in a row that would get us, that we thought would get us straight to the first button so we could start going through maze. Because the whole idea was solve maze in ordnance and then solve cone, which would have been so much easier, because if you can no-clip, you can literally, you don't even need to BS with the buttons. You just go straight to the point. You go to the cone. We didn't know how we were going to kill the cone. Well, the problems for a different time. Figure it out when we get there. And then, assuming we could kill the cone, go to subroutine, possess the key, or possess the Semper, and move the key into the box. Open door, get whatever's behind the door, bing, bang, boom, bang, bing, bang. It just works. It just works. Unfortunately, it didn't just work. And the thing that happened after we did all these inputs is we were irreversibly lost. So yeah, after all of that, we ended up in the void. No sound, no landmarks, like it was just pure blackness, and nothing was particularly working. And then a door spawned in front of us, and we were technically given outside information, but we were told to just fall. So from there on in, that led to the, I don't know if it was my theory or someone else's, but it was another through line in the series, well, not really the series, but like Interloper C, falling to get to places. And for a while, it was working very well. We fell out of maze, and like a day later, we found a new map. It was, we don't even know what the hell it was, because we fell off it pretty quickly, but we just kept falling through more and more maps, which eventually led us to the Civil War of Ordnance, where some people wanted to explore, and I understand why people wanted to explore. I really did too. It's kind of another segue. I was of the mind that because of how Interloper E was structured at the end, where it's like, oh yeah, we found all these maps, or Anomi found all these maps in the FTP server, I was thinking that, like, we're in the source void, whatever we're controlling is obviously on FSky servers. If Anomi has an in, then, like, if we ever get to the quote-unquote end of Ordnance, he's going to be like, oh, look at all these maps I found. Now you can explore them yourselves. Like, I was totally of the mind that eventually we were going to get these maps to look at for ourselves. Unfortunately, as of now, we haven't. But it's like we said, Ordnance, as it is structured, is hostile to exploring. It's just not feasible. It didn't feel good shutting people down, but people were like, yeah, I want to go here, and I want to look at this thing. And we're all just sitting there like, how in the hell are you going to do that? Like, we're all curious. We all want to see, but at the same time, if you want to go to these places with these tiny little nooks and crannies, it's barely feasible with the control scheme of Ordnance. So that did kind of lead to a bit of a civil war where a lot of people were like, I want to explore. We need to fall. I want to explore. We need to fall. And it went on for a bit like that. But yeah, without getting into Vol sacrifices and all that's the long and short of how how my maze theory progressed.
What do you think is the most plausible reason as to how the FSKY servers have been running for so long?
I couldn't possibly tell you how the FSky servers have been running for so long, but it's not inherently outlandish for them to have been running for this long. Like, I work in IT. I've seen stuff like this before. normal, usual practice, if you're running a server that's running a service, you want to restart it every, say, night, if it's doable, just to kind of clear the junk, clear the RAM, get a fresh start in the morning so all your users can connect and do whatever. If it's a live service, maybe every week, every month, depending on your traffic. But if it's a local thing that nobody's particularly, not that they're not using it, but like if it's a local thing that only a couple people are using and you don't have to open it up to the public, then you can kind of forego some of those, I guess, precautions and just kind of run it and do whatever. Like I have a Minecraft server that's been running in my basement for a month straight without restarting because like it's just for me and my friends. I don't really care. Like it's just doing whatever. But I have seen services that if they're running locally like that, they can be running for years, assuming the hardware is durable enough. There's a I don't know if I should say this, but there is a service running where I work that it's a local thing, it's a small thing, but it's actually pretty necessary to a couple other things. I'm being incredibly vague with this because I don't want to give anything away. But the long and short of it is, like, it's the base of several other big things. Well, not the base, but like it's a core component of a lot of big things. But because of the way that it's run, it can't really be shut down without recalibrating a bunch of other stuff. So somebody at some point decided the best way to just leave it running. And I think it has been running for I think over 20 years. It's just kidding. Never do this. It's a terrible idea and it doesn't work. This thing is running on like pre-Windows XP. I don't even know what operating system it's running on, but like it's not outlandish for services like this, like the F-Sky servers. If it's just 2 or 3 people or whoever keeping the lights on some server racks that they're just curious about, either they're curious about what it'll do or they just left it running and forgot about it. It's not outlandish of a concept, especially the part about leaving port 27015 open. If it's a local thing, you would just leave that open so that you and your friends could just connect to that and do what you want at any given time. It was never intended for people to find it. Nobody was supposed to find it, so why would they care? Like, it's not a security vulnerability if, well, it is, but it's not a glaring security vulnerability if you don't make it public, I guess. No, they didn't expect this to happen. It just did. So there's no real reason as to why it's been running for so long, but it makes sense if you've been around servers like this and you just you understand how like large scale industrial servers sometimes are run. It unfortunately does make a good amount of sense.
Hey guys, it's Chase here. I want to thank you all so much for watching. Unfortunately, Lucas was not able to send me his recording in time. However, I do plan to be giving an interview on GAC9 News when it does come, so pay attention to that. Anyways, yeah, I do want to thank everyone for watching, and Lucas, see you on GAC9 News.